panelist to ask it, and we'll keep going through. And hopefully my slides start to change this time. So one of the questions that we wanted to address that we tend to hear a lot from people are just the challenges and benefits of navigating, 3P on Amazon. So maybe I'll come back to you. Steve, you mentioned you've worked with a lot of brands in the space, helped them probably transition to a third-party model. What are some of those challenges and benefits that you've seen firsthand?
Yeah, John, I mean, most of the brands that come to us, they come through a place of complete frustration with that Amazon 1P model. And they're seeing price erosion, they're seeing channel conflict, and they're just throwing their hands up like, Amazon's asking for a lower price. I've got 50 gray market sellers. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they're getting product. And they're just, we need help. And so that third party marketplace, it takes time, it takes discipline, it takes rigor within the business. And there's a lot of cleanup that has to happen. And a lot of that has to happen at a very foundational level that the brand is not used to, because maybe they've been selling through two-tier distribution over time, and lots of retailers that were great brick and mortar customers now see an opportunity to sell the product on Amazon. And so that even though that third party side might look more attractive, if you're not going to go clean it up and try and identify who those third party sellers are and have some coordinated strategy, either a coordination of authorized sellers or moving to a single authorized seller, which perhaps is you as the brand, or it's an agency like Pattern, until you kind of get down to the root of your organization and say, how do we solve this? And recognize that the blast radius is beyond just Amazon. It goes to Walmart, it goes to your distributors, it goes to your sales compensation plans, your supply chain. And I mean, it's this big ball of yarn that you kind of have to spend some time and use, like Avori's and others to kind of unwind that, unpack that, and figure out, okay, how do we regroup? Because you're a brand that has done really well in the brick and mortar space for 30, 50, 100 years. But Amazon in the last 5, 10 years has changed the game for you. And unless you adjust and start making some of those fundamental changes to how you go to market, then you're going to start seeing massive brand erosion and your market share erosion until you figure it out. And so, there's this exclusive model, which we believe is the best model for most brands that have kind of those pricing policies and price points that they want upheld. But you really have to ask those hard questions, like what are we trying to accomplish, and what are we willing to do across our entire organization to clean this up?
Oh, that's great. Nancy, how about from your end? What have you've lived this firsthand? Talk about some of the challenges maybe and benefits that you've seen on this model.
Yeah, I think, as Steve mentioned, you're often hit by Amazon changes, policy changes. And I think we've experienced several things over the course of a couple of years. One of them that happened, I would say about a year to 18 months ago, where Amazon, we have an IMAP policy. And so we had worked with Voorhees to institute an authorized reseller policy as well, which was terrific for us. And then all of a sudden Amazon changed, one of their approaches and allowed, they were then dropping the prices of our authorized resellers automatically without the resellers having approved that. So where we thought the resellers might be in violation, even though they were technically authorized, we came to find out that Amazon was funding the discounts, which was great for unauthorized resellers. So unauthorized resellers had a run for a while that they were able to, the pricing drop was being funded by Amazon. So that threw us for a loop at the time until we got a good handle on it. And then most recently, which, working with Pattern, the VMS, Amazon has decided that VMS needs a certain level of certification. And arbitrarily, we had different products that started disappearing off of the network, and we didn't know why. And I will say in this case, as a 3P reseller, we're, in our case, working with Pattern was able to help navigate that situation for us. But it's the unexpected from Amazon where, whether it's 1P or 3P, these things can be happening to you. But on 3P, having that partnership with Pattern allowed us to navigate some ugly scenarios.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much to dig into there. I think there are a couple of questions that came through as well that I think are relevant to this. So Darren, maybe I'll bounce it back to you since there are some legal implications to this question as well. So this question is two-part. It's when you're a third-party seller, how do you keep Amazon from sourcing your product elsewhere and competing with you by purchasing your product from other distributors? Amazon's mission is to buy everything and commoditize everything. Further, if you're 1P, converting to 3P is complicated since you cannot withdraw IP based on Amazon's terms of service. So I don't know, hopefully you're able to see this one as well. It's a little chunky.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, in terms of, precluding anybody's ability to purchase product from, one of your distributors, I mean, that all comes down to your relationship with your distributor. I mean, there is no magic bullet to that. I mean, as a table stakes threshold, I think that you need to have provisions within your distribution agreements or policies that prohibit the resale to anybody except an authorized reseller. And you can define that largely as you wish in the US with certain, boundaries that are too much in the weeds for this type of discussion. But I mean, that's first and foremost. And secondly, to the extent that you are having this issue, you need to get down to what we would call the diversion source or the root cause of which distributors are supplying and go through that exercise. I mean, there's no magic bullet in that respect other than to have the appropriate language and then to do the work to figure out who it is that's sourcing and apply appropriate business discipline. Now, the pushback you would hear is, oh, I can't do this to this distributor or that distributor, or I can't change my practices. And I mean, if that's the position of the company, then you're going to have to live with the consequences. I think that for a long time, brands, and still today, I mean, very, very sophisticated companies think, Amazon or other marketplaces are going to come around and see it my way or do things my way or that's consistent with how I want to go to market. And I just don't think that that's true. I think that brands and manufacturers today need to evaluate how they will succeed and thrive and exist within the marketplace-driven world that we find ourselves in, because it has no respect for your current distribution setup. I mean, it just goes back to the whole your margins, my opportunity ethos. So the only way out is through on that issue. You want me to touch briefly on the second one, John, or move on from here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The second question is, what are some best practices around maintaining exclusivity on marketplaces, i.e. reducing or eliminating unauthorized resellers? And so this question gets to, the core of what Vorys eControl does. Vorys eControl helps manufacturers and brands to enable the execution of their intended commercial strategy. And so if your intended commercial strategy is to have exclusivity, for example, through Pattern or through your own storefront or even to Amazon 1P, if you only want one seller on the marketplaces, then our view would be that for most brands, the closer that you are to one, the better your performance will be. You need to do several things. Number one, you have to have your authorized sellers under appropriate control, meaning you have to have the necessary policies, agreements with each of your channel customers. So distributors, retailers, co-ops, buying groups, however you're selling, have each appropriate channel under the right policy that says, this is your lane, this is where you can sell my product in an authorized manner. So you have to define your channels. Secondly, you have to have an appropriate legal foundation to stop unauthorized sales. As a general matter, in the US and in most countries around the world, it's totally fine to buy and resell legitimate product. So we're not talking about counterfeits, but just buying and reselling your product out of distribution is totally legal. unless the brand takes very specific steps to ensure that that principle does not apply. And this is where you'll see brands having things like special quality control programs and differentiated warranties that apply to products purchased from their authorized sellers, and other what are called material differences that will allow you to have an actual legal claim that can be leveraged against unauthorized sellers to overcome that first sale doctrine that says it's otherwise okay, allow you to do enforcement and to support your exclusive seller. I would submit to you that going out with a 3P strategy without those necessary control foundations in place is a losing proposition, because your designated seller will become just lost in a sea of resellers that aren't invested in your brand, that are free riding, won't be able to get sales. You won't be able to begin to approximate your 1P sales, and the strategy may fail. And so in order to have the growth and all of the benefits on the 3P side, and ensure exclusivity, or your ability to protect exclusivity, you're going to have to put those foundational things in place. That's just the only way through it.
Yeah, pretty comprehensive. Maybe a different way at that angle, Darren, because you talked about, the fits and starts of different brands that, are going to have to kind of go through the pain of making some of these changes. Have you ever seen an industry or a dynamic in which what you've just outlined from an e-control strategy will not work or does not work? Are there any exceptions, or basically if someone wants to do it, there's a path forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having done this hundreds of times across just about every B2B, B2C vertical being traded, on a marketplace today, it really comes down to the will of the organization, because it's just all about asserting control over your channels and having an appropriate legal foundation to stop unauthorized sales. And so that applies to potato chips just like it does to high-end electronics. And that's just the way to do it. And I think that what brands will find if they really dig into the data and whatnot is that you can become, the growth at all costs mentality will really, hurt you today. And I think, the ability to have that controlled growth, that profitable growth, is where many companies across a great many verticals will want to sit. And so, the path to get there for most companies has relatively similar components, albeit flexed to the unique needs of their organization. So I don't balk at any particular type of product coming to us and saying that they need help, to put it succinctly.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. And I've been shocked personally, as I've been at Pattern the last 3 years, to just see, I mean, to Steve's point earlier, right? People in pet, people in baby, people in electronics, people in apparel. I've just been shocked. And some of them are widely distributed. Some of them will go through direct channels. Some